Welcome to the Just Ask podcast. My name is Becky Bridgham.
And I'm Jim Bridgham.
And we decided to create a podcast where we just answer the questions from our friends and listeners. And you can pretty much ask us anything and we will do our absolute best to answer it. So today's question is, how do you guide your partner to go to counseling? This could be for their own learning, not necessarily couples counseling. So the question is, how do you get your spouse to go to counseling or therapy? Now, Jim has done years and years of counseling and coaching and therapy, so I'm going to default to you first.
Okay, so let's explain what counseling is first. So first of all, counseling is looking at your past, things that might have created some kind of dysfunction in your life, and to bring you to function. Now you might think like, oh, is he saying I'm dysfunctional or broken? No, we all have something that's not perfect in our life. We just all do. And what a good counselor does is explores the past to bring you to function. Now I do want to differentiate, because Becky and I are both coaches, that there's a difference between counseling, which is past focused, and coaching, which is future focused. So what a coach does is they take someone from function, which is someone who's doing very well or pretty well in their life, and brings them to a superior level of performance. So they aren't exploring the past, they're helping you to move into the future. So that's really the two differences between the counseling and the coaching modality. And frankly, like if you're in a coaching relationship or a counseling relationship, it's going to kind of hit both at times, but really the coach is designed to bring something out of you, whereas the counselor is exploring something in you. So what does counseling do? It's going to find ways to say what affected you in the past and how do you deal with that, recognize it, and move past it. And when you have an issue of some kind, it's really going to help you be better, feel better. And so how do you get someone to do it? Because it sounds kind of like ridiculous. It's like, oh my gosh, like I was hurt as a child, or this situation hurt me. It's entering into pain. And really life revolves around two core things: pain and pleasure. We want to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So you have to sell it to yourself or your partner that this will lead to greater pleasure. Because if you say, hey, look, I'm going to go spend an hour with someone I don't know or barely know and go into painful situations, would you want to do that? Hell no, not at all. So you have to sell it from a pleasure standpoint. What has worked for you, Becky, when you've encouraged people to go for counseling?
I think one of the thoughts that I had was, if you are the spouse and you're looking at your partner and you think that they really need help in a certain area, I feel like a lot of it is the approach, right? So it's how you approach them. Like Jim is saying, frame it in that this is a really good idea. This is going to, make you feel great. But also I think you can't necessarily ask your spouse to do something that you're not willing to do. So this also goes back to leading by example. So I know that I would prefer if I go to counseling and I come home, I'm like, hey, I just had this great counseling. I feel so much better. I have more energy. Our relationship is better. That's modeling the benefits of counseling. So first of all, whoever asked the question, I would ask, are you in counseling? Are you walking the walk that you would like your partner to then follow you along? So that would be my first thing, is definitely focus on yourself. I always say, like, someone else's journey is their growth to do. So when you focus on your own growth and you model that, I think a lot of times you will inspire others, right? You can't push someone into something, but you can definitely inspire them. So one, I would say, make sure that you're walking the walk first. And then I think being honest with those conversations, that how can this affect our relationship? So Jim always talks about how you have to use I language. Like, I feel like our relationship would be better if we both did counseling individually, maybe we did counseling together, but having the conversation as not there's something wrong with you and I'm perfect, but hey, we all have room to grow. So maybe we could try this as a family to make our relationship even better. So one, modeling it, and then being really gentle with the communication as far as, if Jim came up to me and said, hey, you're broken, you need to go to counseling, I'd be like, well, screw you, dude. I'm not going to do it, because then it becomes a battle. When it becomes a partnership, like, hey, we're in this together, I think it's more collaborative and less prescriptive.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we've all been in a class, taken a course, watched a video, or read a book that we think, oh, wouldn't it be great if he or she was reading this book, taking this class, or here. My boss should be in this class. My boss or my friend or my colleague should be doing this. Well, if you're doing that, I just first challenge you to explore your own interior work, because most of the time when we're doing that, we have something great to learn. And you may think, no, that person, that boss, that friend is broken and I'm not. And I'm going to tell you, when you do that, chances are you have something broken inside. No, don't take this as me beating you or yelling at you, because I know Becky both of us have walked that journey where we've been there, where we thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if Becky or Jim were in this class? We've had those discussions because, again, we needed some internal work to do. We still do. I guarantee we are always growing. But Becky's 2 examples or 2 points of leading by example, and then trying to sell it in a positive way is a good way, are great. But one thing that works for men, because most of the time men are most apt to avoid counseling, is to use the proper metaphor or analogy. Well, what do I mean by that? If you use the analogy of an oil change, that's the most common one. All of us know that our cars need oil changes. I do have a great story on this that I'm going to take a segue on though. So remember, I took my Kia Soul to the local Kia here in Arapahoe County, Colorado, and I'm sitting there and this guy is freaking out, the service agent. And I've seen him for years, and I said, hey, what's going on? He goes, oh, do you see that car right there? And it's like a 1 or 2 year old car, has 80,000 miles on it, driven all over the place. And he goes, well, they're here asking for a warranty exchange for a brand new car. And I go, well, with this car, why does it need the exchange? Because, well, he never got an oil change. He never did anything to the engine, but drove 80 to 100,000 hard miles on this car, in the mountains and stuff. And many of us would think well, you need an oil change every maybe 3,000 to 6,000 miles, depending on your car. And you wouldn't imagine not getting an oil change. But in this case, the person was trying to take advantage of the Kia warranty by not getting an oil change. You'd say that's insane. That's ridiculous. You need to take care of your car. Well, counseling is just like an oil change for your brain and your soul. All of us should go. It's not scary. The first time you go, it might be intimidating if you're not familiar with the process, but the person's there in a confidential environment to help you solve some issues you have and to explore challenges and feelings and emotions. And I'll tell you, every person I know who's felt like that, that's gone in and said I'm going to try this, and they're intimidated, they're challenged, has come out and said, that was just so good, and almost excited. It's the same idea with an oil change. You may remember the first time you had a car, and maybe you did the oil change yourself, or you brought it into a place. It can be intimidating. Now you probably think whatever, I bring it to the dealership, I go to the local oil change place, it takes an hour, I'm done. But when you were 16, 17 and taking your car in, it's oh my gosh, what is going on? Or you're taking the oil cap off, trying to empty it, and you're what am I doing? If you can go back to that scenario, that's what it's like for many people doing counseling. It's an intimidating process the first time. Now, I know Brene Brown recently in her podcast has talked about that first time of anything we do never goes right. We always have challenges. We're always intimidated. But once we get through it, we're fine. So what I'd suggest is with your partner, recognize this might be their first time, and they think that when they go to a counselor, they're going to say they're broken, their partner's right, and that the situation, whether it's a marriage or personally, is wrong. That's never the case, or rarely the case. The only times I've ever said a relationship's wrong was when there was physical abuse happening. And in that case, there's something terribly wrong, and there needs to be immediate separation till it can get resolved. So I just want to tell you, chances are good, you're fine, and just need to have an oil change for your marriage and an oil change for yourself. I can't overstate what Becky said, though, that you need to lead by example. If you want your partner and you think your partner needs counseling or coaching, and you're not in that relationship, so you are not seeking counseling, you are not seeking coaching, don't even ask the question.
Start with yourself.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think also be aware that, like Jim was saying, when you take your car in for the first time, it's intimidating. And we've all been there where you have places you love to take your car, and then other body shops or mechanics are like, ooh, that's not for me. And so the other layer is when you go to counseling, or when your partner goes to counseling, realizing you're not stuck with that specific person. So if there's someone that you jive with and it works out that first time, awesome. If there's someone that you don't, you're like, I didn't get anything out of this. I felt uncomfortable. I don't feel like it was. Try someone else, because people have different personalities. And I've gone to a number of different counselors just because our insurance had changed and I had to go, seek different coverage. And I'll tell you, my first therapist, I loved. And I got so much out of, 6 sessions with her. The second one, I was like, this is a waste of my time, right? So you have to really, just like you're trying out different body shops or mechanics or different restaurants, you're going to find the one that really fits you and your personality. So also when you're going through counseling, or your spouse is realizing, you're not stuck with that one specific person. And then especially with marriage counseling, we've done marriage coaching for other people. Jim's done lots of marriage counseling. Sometimes you have to get a second opinion. Wouldn't you agree that sometimes
Totally.
you go and there's no change, there's no progress? And then I hear people say, well, the male or the female say, like, that didn't work, we're not doing that anymore. You have to try it out a few times. Just like you're not going to find your favorite restaurant the first one you go to. It might take you a little while to find the counselor or the coach that's going to really help you progress to where you want to be.
And I would suggest that person is definitely challenging you. So if you look at the two things, you don't want someone who's just being passive, but you don't want someone that's over challenging you, but you need someone who's on that side of the spectrum, which is why for many couples who get through their challenges, I suggest marriage coaching. Like I said at the beginning, counseling looks through the challenges. Once you get to function, like, counseling's always good, but you want someone to bring you into that ideal situation. And to do that, you really need a coach that's going to push you a lot more than the counselor, which is kind of shepherd you a little bit. If you think of the shepherd, if you think of the old Middle Eastern shepherd going around with the staff and sheep everywhere, he would have kind of this idea of like gently guiding them, and that's the counselor. But that staff also could be used as like a hitting the sheep, and it's protective in nature. It's designed to, we lived in Turkey, there's so many stories of sheep. Someday we should just have a podcast talking about sheep stories of them like walking off cliffs. It's pretty not funny, but kind of funny. Never mind, I'll stop. But they would have to hit the sheep and carry the sheep so that they could help them kind of grow and to follow the leader to do the right thing. And I'm not saying coaching is like necessarily harmful or hitting, but definitely can be shocking. I've asked more than one question where I've had a counselee or coach coach client say, "Oh my gosh, I just can't believe you asked that." I said, "Well, what's the answer?" And because most of the time you don't want to really grow. Growth is sometimes painful, but it leads to greater pleasure. Like those hard steps, whether it's lifting weights or climbing a mountain, lead to the pleasure of the mountaintop or that physique you want. Nothing great is easy.
I totally agree.
So
with this, the question is, how do you really guide your partner to go get counseling? 1, we talked about make sure that you're doing it yourself. 2, being gentle with that conversation, but really framing it in that positive, like, this is going to help you have an amazing life, have an amazing marriage, have an amazing business, feel good. I think there's so many people out there who are just hurting. And I almost feel like this question comes from a place of like, I really want to help my spouse who might be hurting, not like they're broken and I'm perfect, right? So 1, shepherding them, like Jim said, encouraging them to get there. And then also being aware that you might have to try out a few different resources or different counselors or coaches before you find the one that's really going to help you optimize to that next layer and level of life.
And if you have any questions, you're looking for a counselor or coach, obviously Google is your friend, but you could always ask us. And we definitely do marriage coaching now quite a bit. So that's something that's also an option for you. But for now, we want to thank you for listening to the podcast. If you want to submit questions, you can go to the justaskpodcast.com.
That's correct.
And we just really need more questions. So please send them. We have a few more. We're trying to do 1 to 2 podcasts a week, but it just depends on the volume of questions we get. So please submit them to us. And
we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.